Welcome to lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peters, and now part of the VSiN family of podcasts. We've got an excellent podcast for you as we're going to be joined here in a few minutes by one of our good friends, Robbie Lastella. He does amazing work over at Rocco Miller's website, bracketeer.org. We're going to chat with him about all the hoopla that we are seeing with these court cases and the players getting a fifth year of eligibility. We're going to be fleshing out which of the guys that might be getting some eligibility from one of these court cases might be able to make a little bit of an impact, how much teams like Xavier and Cincinnati benefit from having guys that are already familiar with the system now being eligible, all good to go. If he thinks that just all of these guys in general are going to be getting some eligibility, and just who might be some of the biggest impact players as well. Is it a little bit more of the guards? Is it a little bit of the forwards? And that's actually a nice little two-part answer. So we're going to have a lot of fun chatting up with our good friend in Robbie, and we've got a lot to discuss with regards to this landscape in college basketball in general, because my goodness, it has been wild what we've been seeing out of these court cases. And if you do have a question, comment, segment idea, whatever you for this podcast, you have one or two ways to be able to fire those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at gunit_81. Keep in mind, letter CM, naming does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. And the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it's very much appreciated. And then from there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. And per usual, I do beg with you, I do plead with you, please do send in these Twitter/X questions. Makes the offseason go by a little bit faster. In most cases right now, it's going by very, very fast, because this has been absolutely insane and ridiculous what we've been seeing here in college basketball recently. But that said, I also do want to make sure that I know exactly what you guys want to hear, so that way we can make this the best college basketball season of all time, and just want to be able to help you guys get prepared as best as humanly possible. The conference preview podcast, we're going to be doing, hopefully, I would say 2 more here in the next 7 days. I dialed it back a little bit the last week or two, just because with all these court cases, I would hate to do a conference preview, and it's like, oh, every single roster is a little bit different. So I wanted to wait for that to subside a little bit more, but those will be back in our lives. The plan is to do the MEAC and the Missouri Valley Conference here within the next 7 or so days, so be on the lookout for that. And all throughout the offseason, you're continuing to get great guests like our good friend Robbie Lastella on this podcast. We're up to over 2,400 straight days without a missed podcast, so you can bank on that. And for Robbie, he is money in the bank when it comes to taking a look at this great game of college basketball, doing great work over at not just Rocco Miller's website, bracketeer.org, but he also does a great job over at FAU Owl's Nest. And if you're a fan of college football, you're doing a great job getting set for the American college football season as well. He also does a little bit of work for the New York Giants as well over on the SI New York Giants fan page, and you're able to follow him on Twitter/X at the letter R, last name Lastella, Lastella, word report all together. And Robbie, always a pleasure, my friend. Thank you.
Of course, Greg. Thanks for having me. The portal keeps on moving. You think we're done, and then we're never done, and there's always more to talk about. That's what keeps me and you in business, so always happy to do it.
Absolutely. And I mean, typically when we say that the portal's never done, it's typically like 1 or 2 guys. You get like a coaching change or something like that. Now we've got just absolutely a wild and crazy situation with all these court cases coming out, and just how do you take a look at that impacting the landscape of college basketball? Because a lot of these guys are going to be becoming free agents, and I'm just looking down the list at some of these guys in the state of California, like a Donovan Dent is obviously on there, Duke Brandon. Like, these are guys that could be starters on really good NCAA tournament teams that all of a sudden are going to be becoming available in late July, early August.
Yeah, it's madness. The NCAA did the best they could, I think, with this blanket rule, or non-blanket rule. They didn't provide that blanket year for the guys from last year. And I don't think they could have when they were making this ruling for 4 or 5 and 5. But, they had to have known that now afterwards that, the courts were going to come calling. It's been happening now for years, no matter what the issue is. It's really no surprise to me that this is happening. We still have decisions to come from Colorado, Tennessee, Ohio, Georgia, North Carolina, and you mentioned California as well. Some big names there. Donovan Dent, probably the biggest. Jordan Pope, I believe, is also going to be looped in that California ruling. So yeah, there's a lot to come. You're seeing the effects of this free agency now. The big news the other day with Jamichael Stillwell. Duke Brennan, you mentioned him. Looks like he may be headed to Oregon should he get an extra year. There could be some teams right now that all of a sudden in a couple of weeks are in a much better position than they were. I mean, I'm sure we'll get into some of the teams, but just look at LSU as always. I mean, they're waiting, their hopes and praying, but they very well, if that comes together between Yam Madare and RJ Lewis, all of a sudden LSU could go from being a laughing stock to actually having something there. So a lot to come in the college basketball world for sure.
Oh, absolutely. LSU is the number one team in terms of teams that you have to figure they're going to be out there and going for guys. You mentioned Oregon and Gonzaga with more specific needs. Oregon needing a big man, with Gonzaga losing Mario Saint-Sapri. Donovan Dent does a great job in terms of slotting in there, but who are a few other teams that you're looking at, and maybe they're not going to sign like a whole bunch of guys or anything like that, but maybe they were just a little bit, shall we say, off put by their haul that they had in the offseason, and they might be out there trying to add a guy or two.
In terms of adding a guy, I look at, you mentioned LSU. Florida, I don't believe has a roster spot right now. However, they're on a position with Denzel Aberdeen where I don't know. His eligibility ruling is, in my opinion, it's going to be interesting to see what comes of that. If Denzel Aberdeen gets eligible, whether he does or he doesn't, Florida is going to be in for a little bit of a boost, because most of Florida's portal haul was retention, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. But you look at what's to come here potentially with Aberdeen. If he signs, then that's a great thing, and I think that's a great fit. But then if he doesn't, if he doesn't get eligibility, that's an opening right there for Florida to be a premier destination if they can potentially get one of these guys. I mean, look, if Donovan Dent wants to go get paid, he could go there and slot in. So I think Florida is a team that could have a roster spot if that doesn't go their way. I think, depending on how some things shake out with Oklahoma State, Kashikat and Parsafala both are waiting on their rulings as well. So if both of those guys, either if yes, how the same deal with Florida, if both those guys slot in, that works out a lot better for Steve Lutz and co. But if not, Oklahoma State's got money to spend. They want to get back to the glory days a little bit there, especially with football being down. I think Oklahoma State could be a destination to watch. Maybe Cincinnati, but I think they're full as well, and I think they're good to go with Colby King and MJ Collins. So would keep an eye on Oklahoma State, though, definitely also as another team along with Florida there. I wouldn't say they weren't too happy with their portal hauls, but I think like I mentioned with Florida, they are mostly retention based, so always can get an addition there. And Oklahoma State, they definitely need a lot of help, and obviously LSU as well. But I think LSU will probably just buy whoever they need at that point, because they're getting pretty desperate here in almost August.
Yep, and they've got that Canes money that they're going to be looking to spend as well. We saw them bring over Lane Kiffin, obviously Will Wade, so they've got money to burn. So that's going to be an interesting sort of process, to say the least, as our good friend Robbie Lastella. He does such great work taking a look at this great game of college basketball over at so many different places. The main one that you're able to find him at is our good friend Rocco Miller's website, bracketeer.org. You're able to find him there, and he's joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops. And my friend, it has been just so wild what we've seen over the last few weeks. And how do you take a look at the dynamic of these different teams? Because we've got teams that are going to be signing these guys a little bit later on in the process, but you've got guys that also really never left. Like for Xavier, I feel like they're in a very good spot with bringing back Philip Borovichinen, who he was just there last year. You mentioned MJ Collins. He was over at Utah State last year in that Jared Calhoun system, so he slots in very seamlessly. I think that these are the teams that really benefit the most, because while a team might be able to get a boost from signing a guy late, that chemistry is not going to be there. Meanwhile, for schools like Xavier, Cincinnati, I'm sure there's going to be a few others. Like I'm hearing that Braden Carrington is already on campus at Wisconsin. That would be another move where he would never have left whatsoever. I think that those are the teams that really benefit the most, though.
Yeah, definitely. I look at Xavier as a team, but between Phillip and Malik Moore, I believe he got that injunction granted through the Ohio case, so he's good to go. And so Xavier is a team that I think they are definitely going to benefit. Cincinnati we talked about, but you look at it on the flip side as well, Greg. I mean, how does UCF? UCF is the one who is probably fighting hard there for Jamichael Stillwell. And so, I'm going to be interested to see, with some of these guys who get decisions, and RJ Godfrey from Clemson, potentially waiting on a Georgia case there. There's a couple of other guys too, Chauncey Wiggins at FSU. I believe he was there for 2 years. And so, just guys who have been at a program, for a couple of years, and then they get this fifth year. And then so all of a sudden, do you go back to the place where they were fighting for you there for that fifth year? Or do you go like, I don't think you can blame Jamichael Stillwell for going and getting more money at Texas Tech. So there's going to be teams who benefit from this, but there's going to be teams that are negatively impacted. I don't know necessarily how confident UCF was that they would get Stillwell back. But, I'm sure there may be teams here that, are blindsided by some of these guys that, they may expect just to come back when they get this fifth year, and they actually go portal hopping. So that'll be something to watch here. We'll have cases getting decided over the next couple of weeks, and, it'll be interesting to see because it just, to me, it seems like all of these should be approved. The NCAA didn't do it, but, at this point, you got to give these guys their year, with select, cases where probably not. But, I think it'll be interesting to see what teams are negatively impacted as well as positively that you mentioned.
Yep, it is going to be interesting because there have been quite a few teams that have been fighting for their guys, and all of a sudden, some of these guys, they decide to leave where they came, like you mentioned, Jamichael Stillwell, and I think that that's interesting for Texas Tech because prior to this, I was a little bit down on Texas Tech just because you don't know what you're going to get out of JT Toppin this year. Is he going to be set night number one? Is he going to be good to go for conference play? We just don't know with that. When you lose a guy like a Christian Anderson, that's rough as well. Obviously, Grant McCasland, one of the best coaches in all of college basketball. There's no question about that, but I really feel like that helped shore up Texas Tech, and I feel like they're a team that, once again, maybe they're not a top 2, top 3 team in the Big 12 right now because that conference is so brutal, but I think that they prevent themselves from falling outside of like that tier 2, I would say.
Yeah, I would agree. With a move like Stillwell, that definitely puts them in a better position. The Big 12 is deep, as always. I think this is a year where Kansas is really, Bill Self is that's Kansas team to me. This is going to be the big year for them to make a point. So, obviously that's just one team. But point being is the Big 12 is going to be pushing the Big 10 this year for that best league spot. SEC, obviously, 2 years ago had all those teams. Last year, a little bit down. And the Big 10, in my opinion, had that title. But I think this year the Big 12 is incredibly deep. So a move like Stillwell is absolutely very important. And I wouldn't be surprised to see, some of these other teams in the Big 12 continue to make moves as we see more names get eligibility here over the next couple of weeks.
Yep, and the guys that are going to get eligibility, I think that they're going to be very impactful for so many of these teams as well. And I'm not sure how you look at things, but I truly feel like this is a case where the forwards are going to be able to make a little bit more of an impact than the guards, and I want to talk about this with Robbie on the flip side. How does he sort of weigh that out? And we need to talk about if some of these mid-majors are going to be able to dive in and sign some of these players as well. That's up next right here on Chris Gives Hoops with myself, Greg Peterson, now a part of the Geeks and Family Podcast. Side edge this college basketball season? Well, VSiN experts use CBB Analytics, the most comprehensive college basketball analytics platform in the world. See injury impact, on and off data, clutch time performance metrics, first versus second half splits, and so much more. Utilize the promo code of VSiN, that is VSIN, to get $30 off and find your betting edge over at cbbanalytics.com. That is cbbanalytics, all one word.com. For anyone that is new to VSiN, well, I wish you a friendly hello. This is an attention to anyone that is new to VSiN because you're able to get some free stuff with our daily newsletter. It's a great way to catch up on everything that's happening in the sports betting world. It's delivered straight to your inbox every single morning. VSiN's newsletter offers picks, data, strategies for the day's betting menu, and so much more. Sign up for free today over at VSiN.com/newsletter. That's VSIN.com/newsletter, and start receiving your free newsletter tomorrow morning. That is VSIN.com/newsletter. Stay ahead of the game and bet smarter with VSiN. And we're back to lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Great to be rejoined by Robbie Lastella. He does such great work over at Bracketeer.org. He does an amazing job over at FAU Owl's Nest and so much more. Follow him on the old Twitter/X at the letter R, last name Lastella, Lastella. Word report all together. And Robbie, we've been talking a lot about these court cases and some of the players and teams that might be out there looking to be able to add, and in the case of players where they're going to be looking to sign sign, but I want to compare and contrast which players might be able to make the biggest impact. I do think that out of the guys that get eligibility, I feel like the big men might have a little bit of a, shall we say, larger impact than the guards, because I do think that with a guard trying to be able to get down pat a system in like August, especially if it's a new one, like that's why I'm so bullish on MJ Collins, because he was already in that Jared Calhoun system last year. I think it's going to be a little bit easier for some of these big men to be able to get things down because there's a little bit less for them to learn, and for the big men, they can just go in there, grab some boards, and I think that they can be real dominators right away.
Why, like, you look at a move like Duke Brennan going to Oregon. On the flip side, that was kind of okay because, Villanova went out and got Luigi Swigo. So big men are the hot commodity, especially early on. I mean, you see teams overpay for guys who are just 7 feet tall, but they average, half a point a game. Any big guy who can come in and make an impact right away, I think that's something that you have to really value. And that's why teams saved some NIL here for this point. Duke Brennan is, I don't want to overvalue Duke Brennan because, I think Villanova's fans and basketball fans in general saw as far as he could take you as being one of your premier players, but plug and play him on a team with other stars. I think that's a big addition. And it's just interesting to see now guys that are like how hot the big market is. It's still just as rampant as it was 2 months ago. So there's not as much money to go around. And I think, these bigs are, going to have an argument to be made in court. Like, I could have made this much more money a couple of months ago. This process has been delayed. So I think that's just going back to my previous point of I don't think there's a single way any of these get denied. And so, yes, Greg, I agree with you. I think the bigs are going to be easier to plug and play than a guard. But I think, there's teams out there that are probably, guard hunting, especially, this ruling could, it's, we're focusing on the big names, whether that's Stillwell, Godfrey, Phillip, MJ Collins, Malik Moore, just going down the list, Jason Edwards, I mean, even AJ Storr, if you call that a big name, but there's going to be other guys as well that go down and affect the mid-majors as well. And then that's where I think really the guards will be able to make an impact and have the best fit is at a G5 level or a mid-major level where the system, may be complex, but there's more room for mistakes. So I think the bigs will be the more important at the power conference level, but I think we'll see some guards land at top mid-majors that make an impact as well.
And I'm so glad that you mentioned that as well, because we're all talking about these power conference teams that are trying to be able to make some moves. Is there a mid-major or two out there that you feel like maybe has a little bit more money than what's been indicated? Because we've seen some of these schools like Tennessee Tech and Little Rock actually really shell out here in the offseason. So there are some of these teams that are under the radar. Obviously, High Point has been shelling out so much as well. I don't know if they've got anything left, but if they do, they'll probably try to be able to shell that out as well. But is there a mid-major school or two that you're really looking at the next few weeks that might be able to make one of those splashes?
Yeah, it's not really a surprise. I think, Memphis definitely still has some more money to spend. And, there was rumors earlier in the transfer portal to AJ Storr. I don't know if they have any guard room left. I think Memphis roster is nearing full, if not already. So I don't know, but I think Memphis could be in the market for one of these guys. Also looking in in the American, I think potentially maybe Charlotte, but their roster is full as well. I'm just thinking Wes, and how he's been building out that roster with some big names. I think that could be a landing spot. But, number one, I definitely think Memphis would try to bolster just because the American Conference is really looking competitive this year. And I think there's a chance that Memphis their roster is kind of underwhelming. And for Memphis standards, that's not really normal. If they have money to spend still, and I think they do, I think Memphis will be a team that you see go out and potentially go get an AJ Storr or a type of player here should they gain eligibility.
Yep, and that's going to be interesting because AJ Storr, I believe that would be school number 8 in 8 years for him. Might be school number 9 in 9 years. Like, that is a man that has been passed around like a basket of breadsticks at the Olive Garden. So that would be a lot of fun to say the least. And it's always a lot of fun chatting up with you, Robbie. You're doing such amazing work over at Bracketeer.org. I know you do a little bit of work taking a look at the New York Football Giants as well, and so much more. So all the good people at home know what's all on tap for you and how people can follow along on social media and other platforms.
Yeah, absolutely. We're gearing up coverage over at FAU Owl's Nest right now. Football spring camp is coming around the corner. FAU football's got a lot of retention. Retention at the G5 level is never easy to have. So if you got some money to burn and want to put a future down, FAU American Conference Champions isn't a bad look. No, I'm just kidding. Gamble responsibly here. But yes, FAU football's starting up. That's where I'll be at before college basketball gets going.
Coffee bets, not mortgage bets. That's the big key here. You don't want to be gambling more than you're affording to lose, but hey, if you have an edge, you might want to put down a few dollars there. So that's what I always say. I'm not a college football guy by any stretch of the imagination. I stick to college basketball, but our guy Robbie does such a great job covering the American Conference, Florida Atlantic, and he's helping out with our good friend Rocco Miller, is beaming out like all those schedules right now. He's doing an incredible job, and Robbie, he is such a big part of that. So a big thanks to Robbie for joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN family of podcasts. And if you do like hearing from this fine podcast, Coast to Coast Hoops, you're able to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you do have one of two ways to be able to fire those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at gunit_81. Keep in mind, largely, the mean does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. And the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it's very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. Like I said, I'm trying to make this the greatest college basketball season of all time. So those conference preview podcasts, we're going to pound out a few more here in the next few days. I'm going to continue to take a look at what we're all getting with regards to these court cases, because these rosters, they are going to be changing, and they're going to be changing quite rapidly here in the end of July into August. So certainly keeping my finger on the pulse of that. And then once we get back in the season, picks and analysis on every single game, every single day. So I appreciate you tuning in today, and I'll be back with you once again tomorrow. Thank you.